And now, the rest of this story. I couldn't tell the whole story on last night's video because of time constraints. But the first thing on my mind today is, I told you I got an injection in my left knee for the arthritis. But I remember him, where they use alcohol, before they make an injection. I felt where he was rubbing it and thinking, that's not where Dr. Glass used to put it. So I said, are you sure that's where you want to go? He asked why. I said, well, Dr. Glass did it kind of on the front and the other side. And he commented, well, Dr. Glass is a trauma surgeon. I am a joint replacement specialist. Well, I thought, okay, you're the expert. I didn't say that, but I thought that. And here I am having pain again. So much for that. But yeah, there was a lot of time I didn't cover from my homelessness yesterday. I spent a lot of time, anybody knows Canton, Belton Village area. When I couldn't stay at the Red Roof Inn, there's a strip mall right behind it which is a PetSmart and one of those healthy grocery stores. Yeah, I could go all the way down that grocery store and they had chairs and tables out front. Oh, it's still January, February, so I would sit there. I'd kind of shrink down in case, police would see me or something, which they never did. And I could get Wi-Fi from Red Roof Inn. I was a couple thousand feet away from it, so that worked pretty good. I would sit there all night. And then I make my trek over to McDonald's and have my coffees. So there's a lot of sleepless nights back at this time because I can't sleep outside. I went camping before in a tent. I've had everything I needed, but this wasn't like that. But I used to sit there and I'd walk till I'd arrive at McDonald's about 4:45 or something, and before they open, I'd get right on their Wi-Fi from outside, and then I'd go in and get coffee and sit. And the owner was always there. She's a black lady, very nice. I talked to her several times. And then one day she wasn't there. And an older lady went to, I guess she used the restroom, and there wasn't any toilet paper. And she went and told the girls behind the counter. And oh man, they really smarted after her. It was very disrespectful. And, I eventually got up. I had to go to the restroom. The old lady was standing there. So I stopped and talked to her for a minute. And I said, there's no boss here, so you're going to have that kind of behavior. So I come out from the bathroom. I'm sitting there with my coffee. And one of the girls that works there, she come up to me. She says, you can't stay here all day. And, I look around and nobody else is in there. She says, you come in here early every morning, get coffee and sit all day. I'm doing it for the Wi-Fi and the place to stay warm. So anyway, I left. And I told you I tried sleeping in this enclosed area yesterday, and it started raining. I tried sleeping there one other time, and it was just too cold, and I couldn't sleep. So I never did spend the night outdoors. Well, except sitting in front of the grocery store, yeah. But I never slept outdoors. It was either in a motel or sitting in a motel lobby. I did that for a while at Red Roof Inn, probably a couple weeks. And then a lady who was on vacation come back, and she works midnight shift, and she was kind of nasty. So I couldn't sit there no more. So I started spending all my time in Holiday Inn after that, and in the meantime, a friend I used to work with, he was very generous and very supportive of me. And I got to meet his cousin online on Facebook. Those were both very political, and we agreed. So by this time, politics was dying for me, which it's still dead. And he offered to let me stay at his place. So there's a relay. My friend Roger picked me up in Canton and took me to Medina. And his cousin got me there at his house and took me to if I ever think of it, I'll tell you. It was one of the suburbs of Cleveland to the west side. And I stayed there for about a month and a half. At one point he was going out to get his beer. He liked to drink. So he asked me, "Oh, you're not really a guest here. You're staying here. Why don't you mop the kitchen and bathroom while I'm gone?" So, yeah, no problem. I'll take care of that. So, I finished up the kitchen, and I turned to go back to the bathroom. And that's when I heard a big snap. That was my right knee. And I instantly couldn't put weight on it. But I managed to finish mopping the bathroom. And my friend, he suffered from gout occasionally, so he did have a cane there. So I grabbed that and was using that for a good 2 weeks, maybe a little bit longer, before I could really bear weight on my knee. So, he was very generous, let me stay there. And it was time for me to leave. I think he was getting sick of me. Yeah, I understand. And he brought me back down to Rogers in Medina, and Roger brought me back down to Red Roof Inn here in Belden Village. So I just checked in there right away. And this where it dovetails with what I told you yesterday. That's when a lady contacted me and told me she'd take me to a shelter. And that's how I wound up in the men's shelter, which I did. It was called memory goes when you get old. I'll think of it, and I'll give them a shout out here whenever. But yeah, being in a shelter is a real experience. There's this one guy there, he was a drunk, he befriended me, hung out during the day. But he'd buy these little bottles of vodka, little pints or whatever. He'd sneak them in his backpack. And once he went to bed, he'd start drinking. Then he started getting loud. He's on Facebook talking to women or whatever. And then next thing you know, he's yelling about flying monkeys. Watch out for the flying monkeys. Everybody yell at him, tell him to shut up and go to sleep. And another guy I befriended, he liked to smoke wacky tobacco. You'd see him in the morning, sitting there with an attitude. But when he came back at night, he was lit up. And he was one of the funniest guys. He'd just carry on all kind of shit. I couldn't even imagine saying the stuff he did. So he was right beside me. Had another guy. He's a real nice guy. He took me and, the guy who liked to smoke the funny stuff. He took us to a truck pool, down his neighborhood, which it was down in Fox Township. I think it might have been Mechanicstown, I'm not sure. But, he took us down there. He bought us both dinner and drinks, soft drinks. And I don't mess with alcohol. And we make it back to the shelter. We were a little bit late, but we had told them ahead of time we were going to be late, because that's breaking rules, staying out past 10 o'clock. You get in trouble. And you also have to do a breathalyzer before you get to the bunk room. So, but anyway, the guy that took us, the next day he was in bed a lot. He wouldn't get out of bed. He wasn't feeling good. And he had problems with his feet. He had like an ankle boot on both feet. One was he had like diabetic ulcers on the bottom of one foot. And the other foot, his bones got soft and his toes would break all the time. So he was in bed, he was making these ungodly sounds, like grunts and, and I flagged down the supervisor. I said, hey, you better keep an eye on this guy. I don't think he's well. Maybe you should call an ambulance. So we called an ambulance. We went to the hospital. Nobody's really hearing anything, so I called him to the hospital. He informed me that he was going to lose his foot. I think it was his left foot, because of diabetes. So after he had the surgery, me and this other guy, we went to visit him and, tried to cheer him up a little bit. But, they took him off foot. It was more than his foot. It was just below his knee where they cut it. So that's the last time I ever saw him or talked to him. I suppose he's okay. I haven't heard from anybody telling me anything different. And we had this one guy who was in there for a short spell. He didn't really talk to anybody, but he talked to all the voices in his head. And he talked out loud. And his arms were always like, you know, Beavis and Butthead and Cornholio. You'd see him walking around outside, just having on conversations with himself. You know, sometimes he'd have a cigarette in one hand and a drink in the other hand. He was definitely ill, mentally ill. He talked to himself constantly. And he would sit in his bunk at night. He would sit up talking, you know, keep everybody awake around him. So I guess they asked him to leave, or they made him leave. I didn't see the procedure. I don't know how it works. And there's a young kid. He was in kind of next to me in the one bunk I was at. I saw him one day. He was across the street. Him and some guy were throwing rocks at this big garage door and hitting it. And they were kind of weird, you know. They'd get close and they'd separate. They'd get close and they'd separate. But eventually the other guy, he went across the street. And there's railroad tracks behind the building, and he was seated between a building and the railroad tracks. And this young kid, he came over. He's standing at the curb. I guess he was yelling at the other guy, but it was all whispers. You could barely hear him, you know, but he thought the other guy was hearing him, but of course he wasn't. But he'd start at it in bed too. Start calling people names, and you know, he's lucky he didn't get beat up in there. So they ended up throwing him out too. Yeah, there's a lot of craziness in there. What's another guy? Oh, okay, he was an Italian guy. I kind of get along with Italians. Whenever I see one, we tend to strike up friendship. So he's walking around with the walker, telling everybody about his mob connections. And being a real tough guy. But he's small. A small, short guy. He's all talk. Until one day he started arguing with somebody. And he picked up this walker and tried to throw it at him. Luckily he hit the wall and the walker didn't really go anywhere, but he had a seizure one night back in the bunk room. Nobody there knew how to deal with the seizure. I sort of did, but I didn't get involved. But I was telling the guy working there, if you guys are going to keep him, you're going to not handle seizures. No, we're not keeping him. So, you know, after the incident of throwing the walker at somebody, he was gone. And there's a lot of guys on walkers in there too. Yeah, I had a black guy. He's from Alabama. Well, call him Bama. He's a cool guy. But he's the one that got me sick the second time. And all his coughing and crap. There's another older guy, 60-something. I don't know his whole story, but he was kind of more like me. You know, no drugs or alcohol or mental illness. He just seemed to be down and out. But he always made sure he had time to go get a pedicure. So, it just, one of the crazy things. So, see, it wasn't another close to a fight. There's a guy we called Popeye. He hung around there all the time. And he finally applied and they let him in. Of course, he was a druggie. And he was back there in the bunk room one night. He was just too cranked up, I guess. So he left. So you leave, you're out. But still, these people hang around. And he came into, we call it the day room. He came in one day, and people were kind of shouting him down, and not supposed to let people in that don't stay there. So he was there. So this guy, he's in a wheelchair. He had all his toes cut off, diabetes. So he was a hot-tempered guy. So I'm standing near Popeye. And then this guy in a wheelchair, I used to call him Hot Wheels, but he started flying down there in a wheelchair. And he jumped up on his feet. And I had to put my arm out to hold him back so he wouldn't, swing or, do any violence. But that was enough for him. He got 90 days out because of that. There's a few other fights, a few other crazy people. I am very happy to be away from that environment. They had a 25-year celebration down there. They said they're having food trucks and everything, so sorry about that. But I was excited. I said, I'm gonna go down there and pick out. They're having a barbecue truck, an Italian truck, and a couple of dessert trucks. And I get there and reality sets in. We'll give you one meal ticket and one dessert ticket. You can't get no more than that. I was gonna stand in line at the pizza truck and see if they would sell me some pizza, but the line was too long. So I got this little piece of chicken, very small, with macaroni and cheese, coleslaw, and there's something else, I don't remember what it was. The chicken and barbecue sauce on it. It was meant to go on a bun, but I didn't want the bun. I'm thinking now if they did put it on the bun, you wouldn't be able to find it. It was so small. Like that kind of fair food and food trucks. And I was sorely disappointed. But I got to see a few people. Of course, there's regular turnover there. People don't stay forever. I saw the wheelchair guy. He made it back in. And, some of the supervisors and counselors, I saw them. And the girl that works over in the cafeteria. It was nice seeing them, talking to them. But I was sorely disappointed in the food and the warm pop and water they offered you. Like they had ice in the bottom of these trays, but everything was stacked on top, so nothing was cold. It was kind of starting off our heat wave there. It was, between 85 and 90 degrees. So it was nice to see people, but I didn't enjoy the food or the drink. So I guess that gets me pretty much through the shelter. Yeah, there's a few more stories I can dig up later and share them with you. Kind of amusing. So we'll leave it at that. Thank you.